This is an overview of our 4-H land judging contest. This contest is usually held in the fall. Most regions will offer a junior or junior high division in addition to the senior high division. The contest is made up of 4 pre-dug pits that are based on the soil characteristics present. Ideally, the pits will be about 3 to 4 feet across, and the depth is determined by the soil present. Participants can bring a pocket knife and a pencil. They are not allowed to bring a water bottle or a clipboard with any writing or drawing on it. Water bottles will be provided at each pit for their use. In most cases, the contestants will have between 15 and 20 minutes per pit with a rotation time in between. The Land Judging Guide is the publication that is used to study and prepare for the land judging competition. Many of you will look at this and say that looks a little ancient. Well, the good news is land judging has not changed in many, many years. As you're preparing for teams, you may find that parents of 4-Hers, grandparents, and other community supporters will have used this same exact land judging guide as they were preparing for their contest. This is available online and also has a publication number that you can use to obtain this resource. Our land judging scorecard looks like this. There is a front and a back, and these are pre-printed on cardstock, making it easier for the kids to use during the contest. These are set up with the barcodes for our ShowWare scoring system. The contest itself, each scorecard is divided into 4 sections, and we will review each of those sections throughout our presentation. Part 1 of the contest is soil characteristics. This is one of the most important parts of the entire scorecard. What you use here determines the answers that are marked on the other 3 parts. In this section, the youth will be able to determine the surface texture, the subsoil texture, drainage class, erosion, slope, water holding capacity, depth of soil favorable for roots, rock fragments and outcrops, and the position of the site on the landscape. This is the most physical part of this contest, and the youth will actually need to go into the pit to determine each of these characteristics. Texture is probably the most important soil characteristic. We use 3 different textures for land judging in 4-H. Texture is determined for the surface soil within the top 7 inches of the surface of the pit. Our subsoil for the contest is determined between 18 and 24 inches on the surface of the pit. In each pit, there will be 2 lines or 2 pieces of flagging that are anchored to the top of the pit and go all the way to the bottom. Between these 2 lines is where the contest official makes their determinations for each of these categories. During the contest, 4-H members are not allowed to dig between the 2 ribbons. If they do, they mess up the official portion, and it ruins the chances for other 4-Hers to have a fair look at what the judges saw. 4-Hers are allowed to dig to either side of the ribbons, but not too close. As 4-Hers are learning about texture, The three types of texture we use in Tennessee are coarse, medium, and fine. Determining soil texture takes a little bit of practice. One of the most common methods is to dampen the soil and roll it into a ball, much like you were rolling up a ball of Play-Doh. Taking that ball in the palm of your hand, bouncing it 2 or 3 times, and determining if there's any cracks or breakage of the soil. If there are, we're looking at a coarse textured soil, meaning it's going to feel a little bit gritty and sandy. When pressed between the thumb and forefinger, it does not make a clean ribbon. For fine textured soil, during the dampened ball bounce test, that soil will not break apart. It will hold together quite readily, and between the thumb and forefinger, it will make an elongated ribbon, and the soil may appear shiny or slick looking on the thumb. For medium texture, it's going to be a combination of coarse and fine. It will stay together for a little while, but eventually will break apart. It will make a little bit of a ribbon, but not as long as our fine textured soil. In the pit, looking at the face of the soil that has been dug out, we're also going to use this area to look for erosion. Do we feel like there is a loss of the surface soil? We're going to look at colors of the soil to help us determine drainage classes. Our soil ideally would be between a reddish brown and dark brown color. Soil color is determined by the minerals found in the soil at the site. As our soil becomes less well drained, the color of the soil is going to change. Moderately well drained soil will still be reddish in color, but may have some flecks of yellow in it. When we get into our somewhat poorly and poorly drained soils, we are now looking at soil that has become waterlogged for a long time. And due to a chemical reaction in the soil is now gray in color. This poorly drained and somewhat poorly drained soil really limits what we can do with the site. While we're also looking at the soil profile, we are looking for rock fragments, and that helps us determine the water holding capacity, which is based on soil type and rocks present. One of the key pieces in our soil characteristics is the slope. Slope is defined as the change in vertical elevation over a given horizontal distance. You may have learned this as the change in rise over the change in run. Typically, slope is expressed in a percent. For our contest, there will be 2 slope stakes that are placed either 100 foot apart or 50 feet apart. On our scorecard, there are 2 slope categories. We have categories for West Tennessee, and then we have slope categories for East and Middle. Make sure your 4-Hers are looking at the correct percentages for the area they are judging in. A good example of this is looking at the scorecard for moderately steep. In West Tennessee, this is only going to be an 8 to 12% slope. However, for East or Middle Tennessee, this jumps to a 12 to 20% slope. Those slope percentages determine many of our other site characteristics, so it's important to get them correct and make sure we are using the correct location for the slope. Position of the site on the landscape is another piece to help us determine our land capability. We have 4 positions that we use in the contest. We have floodplain, which is located near a stream, and whether the stream is actually flooded at the time or not, it still is in a floodplain because there is the potential for flooding in that area. Depression is a bowl-shaped part of the landscape with no outlet for water to run. Typically, if you can stand in the bottom of a depression, you're going to see land higher than you all the way around. It's like you're standing in the middle of a cereal bowl trying to look out. Our foot slope would be the position at the bottom of a hill before it levels out. And then our final one is an upland or a terrace. Upland would be at the top of a hill, and a terrace is a very flat area that is created to help with erosion, and either one of those are used in the same category. So here is what part 1 of our scorecard looks like. Each of those sections has a point designation, and the student must mark a choice here to receive credit for the sections. When we move to part 2, we are now working on the interpretation of the soil characteristics. Here we're taking all of the things we marked in part 1 and determining our land capability class, our limitations of the soil for crop production, our estimated yields for crops, and our potential environmental problems. When we look at this scorecard, the first part is the land capability class. Here we're determining if any of this land is to be used in cropland, or does it need to be not used at all. So for most of our area, classes 1 through 4 are what we consider cropland. Anything in those we could still cultivate and produce an agricultural crop. We never mark class 5 for Tennessee. Class 6 is something that we could put the land in pasture and trees, and class 7 is permanent trees. We tend to also not use class 8 for our contest. Looking at the section that says limitations of this soil for crop production, there are 8 items here, and what we are doing is marking anything that is less than ideal. Ideal pits will be well drained, have medium textured soil, no erosion, high water holding capacity, very few fragments, very few rock outcrops, nearly level slope, and ideally would be on an upland or terrace or a foot slope. As we go through, we're going to mark anything that is less than ideal. Part C of part 2 is our estimated yields for crop production. For land judging, we have 7 categories or 7 crops that we are using, and these low, medium, and high designations are based on our water holding capacity, our slope, and our drainage. So we're determining if corn, cotton, soybeans, tobacco, small grains, alfalfa, and fescue white clover, what kind of yield will they have on this site? Even though one or more of those crops may not be grown in your area, it is still important to think about the yield for those based on the soil characteristics. The final part of part 2 is our potential environmental problems. We're looking at sediment, nutrients, or pesticides in streams, or nutrients or pesticides in groundwater. So we're looking at what kind of slope we have and if there is any runoff that could cause a potential environmental problem, or is the soil type going to cause nutrients or pesticides to leach down into our groundwater. Part 3 is our management practices. Now that we've determined our soil characteristics and our land capability class and estimated crop yields, what kind of management practices can we use on the site? We're going to go through and pick our 1 most intensive recommended use, and then we're also going to select any recommended practices that could help our site. When we look at the scorecard and it says check the 1 most intensive recommended use, these are based on our slopes and our land capability classes. They're going to help us determine if we need to be in continuous annual crops with minimal conservation or maybe annual crops with intensive conservation. Or do we need to have annual crops in rotation with a perennial grass? Or is this site best utilized with permanent grass and legume cover or in trees? Once we've determined that, then we're going to check all of the recommended practices that are suitable for our site. These are based on our slopes and our land capability class. Typically, if we have cropland, we're going to always check number 7 and number 9. We're going to use filter strips and lime and fertilize by soil test, which we know utilizing a soil test is a recommended extension practice. The one that's used probably the least often is a drainage system. Based on slope, we're going to use a lot of conservation tillage or no-till, terraces, contour farming, strip cropping, and cover crops as recommended practices to help minimize soil loss. Part 4 of our contest is the home site. Many of our 4-H members who participate in land judging may not go on to have a production agriculture on a site. However, many of our 4-H members will also go on to become homeowners. So it is important to learn about how soil characteristics relate to a home site, especially one that is going to require a septic tank. So we are checking suitability for this home site based on the following: drainage, flooding, depth of the soil, slope, the percolation rate, and the shrink swell. So as we look at the Part 4 section of our scorecard, you can see that we're going to rate each one of these based on whether it's good, fair, or poor. With our drainage, this is based on our drainage class that we marked on the first side of the scorecard. Is it good if it's well drained? Is it fair because it's moderately well drained? Or is it poor because it's somewhat poorly or poorly drained? Flooding becomes a yes or no answer here. If it does not flood, it is good. If it floods, it then becomes a poor site. Our depth here, we are thinking depth to bedrock. Bedrock can impede the use of a septic tank, so if we have a very deep pit, greater than 60 inches, we're considering that good. Often if our pit is very shallow, that's going to be a poor site. Percolation rate is how our water moves through our soil. Here we're determining whether we have hit any kind of bedrock or a fragipan, which is essentially consolidated soil. Shrink swell comes into play when we have heavy clays that are present as our soil textures. The Part B of the scorecard there is an overall suitability for a home site. You're going to mark the lowest thing that you marked from Part A. So if any one of those 6 is poor, the overall site becomes poor. Our state contest is usually held in October or November, depending on site location availability. This contest does rotate between the 3 regions and is held in conjunction with our FFA land judging contest. The top 4 senior high teams from each region are invited, and the contest format is exactly the same as the regional level. There are 4 pits with the exact same scorecard, and each team member rotates through the pits. At the awards dinner, the top 2 teams are named, and they will represent Tennessee in the National Land Judging Contest that is held in May in Oklahoma. In closing, I'd like to leave you with some helpful information. Land judging is not something that you can learn overnight. It does take some time and effort to learn the material and to feel comfortable teaching it to the 4-H members. Many agents will reach out to their soil conservation staff or their NRCS soil scientist in their area for help learning the material and to help with practices and information. Other counties also partner with their ag teachers and local FFA chapters to work on land judging together to offer more practices for the youth and to secure practice locations. You may want to reach out to your A&R agent to help find local farmers and landowners who are willing to dig a few holes on their property and allow you to practice. If you have questions about eligibility, rules, and guidelines for the land judging contest, reach out to your region 4-H program leader or the state 4-H office for more information. We are all here to help you have a successful land judging experience, to help you encourage and support youth as they compete in this contest, and we wish you all the best as you take on the challenge of 4-H land judging.